Thank you very much. I'll tell you, that chaplain this morning did an incredible job. He was awesome. The chaplain I grew up with in the Boston Fire Department, Father Dan Mahoney, our chief chaplain, always said that a person's first act of bravery is taking the oath to be a firefighter. And, you know, we've been called heroes. We always kind of shun at that, you know, because you're only as good as your next fire. But we need heroes too. And I said it in that film. And Diane Carter is our hero. People tried to shut her down. And I know firsthand they went through a lot, the Carters, Paul included, after a storied career in Worcester. And I thank both of you for your courage. And Paulie, thank God you're doing well. Keep kicking that cancer's ass. I don't think there's anyone tougher than a woman who knows that her man's being wronged and now her son who's on the job in Worcester. Thank you so much, Di. And thank you to Kathy Crosby Bell. Hopefully you'll see this at some point. I know you heard in the film, Kathy started the Last Call Foundation after her son, Michael Kennedy, was killed on Beacon Street in the Back Bay of Boston. A good pal of mine, he and Eddie Walsh got killed. And from that, Kathy took her pain, her loss, and put her efforts and her passion into making all of us and our members safer. Matter of fact, she just, working with NASA scientists, built a fire hose, manufactured a fire hose that won't burn. And her mission, the mission of Last Call, of which Jay Burns is now the executive director, who you saw in the film, former president of Fall River, is to save our lives. God bless her. And she took a look at what Diane was telling her and funded the science that combated the industry's data and science. And thank you to Dr. Graham Peasley and Notre Dame for the work they did to shine a light on this god-awful situation that we've found ourselves in. And being able to educate each other and the public is going to be pivotal in our ability to correct this injustice and, quite frankly, leave the world a better place. And I want to thank Elijah Yetta Bowman, his team at Ethereal Films, for what they've accomplished in that challenge of trying to explain this complicated issue. Thank you guys so much for lending your talent, your energies towards this very important, worthy mission to ultimately leave the world a better place. Thank you. And Mark Ruffalo, who lent his name, his talent, his energies towards this film that ultimately is about the members that pay the dues into the IAFF and expect us, their leaders, to protect them. Thank you, Mark, for lending your celebrity to this cause of righteousness. And I want to thank our GST, Frankie Lima, for introducing this film and all the work he does every day. And I want to point out, aside from my constitutional role as GST when I served in that office, at convention to speak, I never spoke at an ALTS, a Redmond, a LegCon. There was only one time I was asked to speak to the membership at an event, and it was to thank those same sponsors of the Cancer Summit. And I can tell you, if I knew then an inkling of what I know now, that would have been an entirely different scenario. You know, Paul said it in the film. We all kind of knew coming on the job, someone told you, whether it was in drill school or fire academy or when you got to your firehouse, the cancer is an unfortunate byproduct of what we do. It's part of the sacrifices that we make. It didn't take long for me to see it firsthand. I got appointed in October 97, and on December 7th, a guy I've known my pretty much whole life up to that point, a guy named Paul Griffin, named Rambo. Rambo Griffin was a lieutenant in Vietnam, died of cancer, and as his FFOPs in the drill school, we went to his funeral, and that was my first funeral. It was a cancer death, and shortly thereafter, in my firehouse, Billy Hayhurst, our chief on Group 4 in District 4, was diagnosed, fought a tough battle, kept working the whole time as long as he could. Loved being a firefighter, was a great chief. We buried him. Cancer, and line of duty death related to cancer, has unfortunately been part of our job for a long time. As I said in the film, we always attribute it to as a byproduct of the combustion process and the chemicals that are in society that we inevitably are exposed to. But it sure seems like now, today, we have more and more cancer diagnosis amongst our ranks than ever. The one thing we do on a daily basis that consistently exposes us to carcinogens is put on our bunker gear. Every time we go to work. Sometimes 20 times a day, sometimes more. It's our single greatest source of exposure to known carcinogens. The very gear designed to protect us is killing us. It defies logic. As Frankie said, it makes you angry. It makes you angry when you think about just what Jay Burns said, of which I am guilty of, putting my children in bunker gear and taking a picture. Some little kid coming by the firehouse, asking to come in and look at the truck, put on the helmet, put on the jacket. Knowing what we know now, it's crazy. It would be nuts to do it. And it begs the question, what are we doing about it now for ourselves? I know a lot of guys that I've worked with, we had the conversation, they're like, isn't this stuff everywhere? It's in the pots, it's in the, whatever. What do you, screw it, there's nothing you can do about it. That's not a good enough answer. What about the probie walking through the doors that hasn't had 2, 4, 6, 20, 30 years of exposure to this? Don't we owe it to the kids coming through the door to change how we're doing business, to change our protocols, to limit our exposure to it? We're all taught a little bit of hazmat. Time, distance, shielding. Can we put distance between us? Time we have to use it, shield ourselves from it, put it in a compartment. There's nothing we can do. I don't buy that. And it's not just about us. It's certainly about kids coming through the door as probies or little kids walking through the door. it's also about our families, like what we're bringing home, how much we're exposing ourselves to it, that we may very well be carrying with us back into our own houses. We need to change our own culture. We need to change our protocols when we're going to wear that stuff. We need to lead. There's no excuse not to. Did you know that PFAS stays on your skin once you're exposed to it for about 3 weeks? It's kind of like a nicotine patch. You can rip it off, but the nicotine absorbs into your skin, even if you take a shower. That's what we're exposing ourselves to. They've done dust studies in the firehouses. They're loaded with PFAS. And I want to stress firehouse, not station. God bless you Canadians, not fire halls. Our firehouse, where we sleep, where we eat. It's where we live, and it's loaded with PFAS, undoubtedly, from the gear that we put on every day and carry around throughout the firehouse. One of the cancers that's legally proven to be related and caused by PFAS is testicular cancer. We as firefighters are 200% more likely than the general public to contract testicular cancer. And when we do, we're 3 times more likely to die from it. I have another very scientific stat, kind of like the 19 out of 31 guys that retired from my firehouse that I called to go to the Christmas party that were diagnosed with cancer. Another scientific stat for you. The Professional Firefighters of Massachusetts Executive Board has 16 members. Of those 16, 3 of them have been diagnosed with testicular cancer, which, by the way, is common in males in their 20s and early 30s. These 3 current PFFM Executive Board members were diagnosed in their 40s and 50s. Highly unusual. What's the common denominator? And let me tell you, they don't all work together. They're in different parts of the state. I'd be willing to bet they've never been to the same fire together. What's the denominator? I've been putting bunker gear on for 20, 25 years, longer. Another stat for you. Female firefighters have an increased incidence of reproductive health problems, and PFAS that we're exposed to, absorb in our skin, inhale, etc., can actually be passed on to our children, from a parent to a child. I want to thank our Canadian trustee, Alex Forrest. Alex, stand up for a minute. Through the efforts of Alex Forrest, who spent north of a decade working on the International Agency for Research on Cancer, IAFF, which is a division of the World Health Organization, to take a look at the studies on cancer in the fire service. And because of his efforts educating those researchers, firefighting has been declared a Group 1 carcinogen, lethal to humans, the most dangerous category of carcinogen out there. When it comes to PFAS, that portion of our exposure, it's not just cancer that causes problems within us. It's fertility issues in both males and females. It's low testosterone, which, by the way, is a contributing factor to behavioral health issues, including depression. Another big challenge we have: low sperm counts, asthma, the suppression of our immune system. Ever feel like you're getting sick a lot? And a whole host of other health issues. For us, the stakes couldn't be higher. Just like when a bell rings, a box comes in, we go where the fire is. We got to take this problem head on. This fight we have, it's righteous, and we have to pursue it. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be a cakewalk. It's not going to happen overnight. But we have to start now. We got to take this head on now. We're coming up against some very powerful interests with friends in high places and billions of dollars in the bank. They've been around a long time, but they haven't been around as long as us. And we're going to be around a lot longer. These corporations that we're getting ready to take on, they've known since 1965 that PFAS is toxic. PFAS will make you sick. Yet we're still getting exposed to it day in and day out. And they've run disinformation campaigns to try to discredit people that shine a light on the truth, people that speak truth to power. We, the IAFF, we need to be that change for ourselves, for the public we took an oath to protect, and for each and every one of our grandchildren, even if they haven't been born yet. We can't rely on biased scientific research that creates data that ultimately benefits the corporations that funded the data. We can't rely on broken standards bodies that bow to the corporate interests that ultimately fund them. We have to take them all on. Like I said, not just for us, but for our grandchildren. We've made changes at the IAFF to meet this need. The IAFF now has its first ever Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Danny Wu, who did 30 years in the fire service with Metro-Dade down in Florida, Local 1403. We now have our first Chief Science Advisor, Dr. Derek Irwin, a Local 1014 LA County member, who's also a chemist, a scientist at UCLA. We now have our own Department of Science and Research, being headed up by Neil McMillan from Ottawa Local 162, someone that's traveled this globe pulling apart the disinformation that's being spewed about by these biased, corporate paid-for scientists. We can now do our own research, and all we want is the truth. And we won't back off till we get it. And let me tell you, the classes you're going to take this week are extremely important. You need to make sure you know how to run your union transparently, above board, that can withstand scrutiny. When you go to the GST classes this week, make sure you're paying attention, that you're protecting your local, that it's being run properly. We need to be able, you can't stand up and take on powerful interests when you got baggage, when you got exposure on the backside. That forces you to keep your head down, to not speak up. Need to pay attention in the communication classes. That's going to be very important for us, whether it's educating our own members or making sure that the public understands what our threat is and what that threat is to them, ultimately. Keep it in mind, we wear that bunker gear at the people's houses every single day in every single city, in every single town, in every single state and province. When you go to those government affairs classes, it's important that you hone your skills in lobbying. That's going to be important. We're going to need those elected officials. It was one of the first things that I brought to the President of the United States was this challenge, this fight, this wrong we need to right. Put this in perspective. Right now, a set of bunker gear is about $4,000. We have roughly 300,000 active IAFF members. If we wanted to replace this gear with chemical-free, toxic-free, PFAS-free bunker gear and provide them 2 sets, that replacement cost number comes out to about $2.4 billion. We're going to need help. We're going to need help from policymakers. That's why those lobbying classes are important. You know, when you want to affect change, in particular, in the realm where you're trying to combat greed, which is a human flaw, you got to disincentivize that greed. You got to hold bad actors accountable. And to do that, you need help. You need help from the best when you're taking on powerful, deep pockets with friends in high places. Over a period of several months, the IAFF staff and our elected leaders interviewed many of the top law firms in the country. And last February, this executive board took action that we're going to stand up and do whatever it takes to fight this fight. Each of those firms made multiple presentations traveling to our headquarters in D.C., also making a presentation to our executive board just this past December. The board fully vetted each of those firms, and we all agreed that 3 of those law firms stood out from the rest. We kicked it around. There were certain things we liked about one particular firm, certain things we liked about another, certain things we liked about another firm. And rather than try to just choose one, we asked those 3 firms that we found to suit our needs best to join forces and help us take this battle on. We have lawyers on that team that have been representing firefighters for over 40 years. They represented our families when they sought justice after the 9/11 terror attacks. These firms have successfully taken on the biggest corporate interests in the world, in both the United States and in Canada. I want to quote from our engagement letter. I think it's important. The IAFF engaged these firms to represent, counsel, and advise the IAFF in our efforts to eradicate PFAS from our gear, other PFAS-related matters, and to save the lives of firefighters through these efforts. That's their charge. Now I'd like to introduce 3 of the top lawyers representing those firms. I'd ask Nick Pepane, Ann McGinnis-Curse, and Dan Bluen to please join us on the stage.
My name is Nick Pepane. I'm a partner at the law firm of Sullivan, Pepane, Block, McGrath, Kafinas, and Canavo. First, I want to thank Ed for this opportunity, for this privilege, for this honor. I also want to thank the other two firms that have been retained along with mine to represent the IAFF and its members in ending this scourge. And I want to thank Diane Cotter for the mission that you began, for the crusade that you've put up there, and Paul, for the fight that you continue to fight. For 45 years, I've been with the firm, and for my entire career, representing firefighters has been an honor I cherish. I came to the firm at a law school in August of 1978. 2 weeks after the August 2nd, 1978 Walbaum supermarket fire that claimed the lives of 6 firefighters in a downtown supermarket. We represented the families of those firefighters. My partner, Bob Sullivan, who's in the back, led with the trial to represent and successfully represent those families. During those 45 years, we've represented many firefighters who have lost their careers because of what they've done on the job because of the fault of others, and too many lives that have been lost, and the families of those members. 1978 it started, and it goes up to the present. In particular, what brings to my mind is 2001. On June 17, 2001, Father's Day, New York City's firefighters, New York City's bravest, lost 3 firefighters in a hardware store fire. We took on their cause to represent their families, to make sure they received the compensation they deserved for their losses. And then, of course, 3 months later came that infamous day of 9/11, when our nation was attacked. That day is of particular importance to us. It came close to home, both physically and in our hearts. Our offices only being a few blocks from the World Trade Center. But more so, we mourned for everyone that died that day, but in our hearts was a special mourning for the 343 firefighters who were killed. And we knew, as the firm that represented the New York City Firefighter Union for New York City, the firefighters, something we had done for over 40 years, we had to step up and do the right thing. And the first thing we did was to help Congress pass the September 11 Victim Compensation Fund, to make sure those first responders and firefighters and their families were properly compensated for their losses. And we, in particular, among the cases we took on, among the clients we took on, were 362 injured firefighters and families of fallen firefighters who died on 9/11. And for those firefighters and their families, those 362 families, we recovered for them $262 million. But we had to do something more. We had to do something more. We had to give back. We had to show our honor for all that they did and all that they lost. And for that, we took no fee on that $262 million. Our work on 9/11 did not stop with the Victim Compensation Fund, which unfortunately closed too early in 2004. So in 2004, my firm was the first firm to bring suit against those responsible for making sure firefighters and first responders at 9/11 and in the recovery efforts were provided with proper personal protection equipment. And we brought suit because of that failure to bring and to give them the proper personal equipment, the proper face masks, the proper respiratory gear. And we ended up representing 675 firefighters and first responders in that lawsuit. It was a long, hard-fought battle. It ended in 2010, and for them we recovered $125 million. But no, that was not the end. In 2011, we lobbied Congress to reopen the Victim Compensation Fund, the 9/11 Victim Compensation Fund. And fortunately, we were successful in our efforts. In January of 2011, President Obama then signed into law the reopening of the 9/11 Victim Compensation Fund. And among the many, many clients that we've represented were 350 firefighters who were prior clients of ours, who we represented and recovered $364 million for no fee, because that's what they deserved. And now here we are, and thanks to Ed and the IAFF board, who has put together a team of firms that have successfully taken on the major tobacco companies, Big Pharma, the opioid industry. These are national firms who are ready to fight and continue the mission that you started, Diane. You see, in representing firefighters for 45 years, I've come to learn it's not a job for you. It's more than a career for you. It's who you are. You save lives. You help people. And you put your own lives at risk to do it. And to not be provided with the proper personal protection equipment is inexcusable, is irresponsible, is reprehensible. And we intend to correct that wrong and make sure that this PFAS is eliminated from the gear that is supposed to protect you. When you go into that burning fire building as people are running out or are waiting to be saved by you. We take on that fight because it's what we do, it's who we are. And with that, I'm going to turn over the mic to Dan, who represents one of those firms that has nationally taken on Big Pharma and the opioid industry and well beyond that.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks to the executive committee and to Ed and to everyone in this room that's going to put their faith and their help as we try to make a difference, MAD, as we try to effectuate change. But change isn't easy. My kids have a book that's called What Do You Do with the Problem? I think it's more than anecdotal about certain cancers in a certain firehouse. I want to use the opportunity right now. I want to take a picture. Of the people in this room, how many people know somebody that you worked with day in and day out that got cancer from their work on the job? I'm looking at 2,500 hands. It is our duty to make sure that in 10 years, in 15 years, if we were to ask that question again, so many fewer hands would be down. An astonishing number of lives have been touched by cancer. My father died of kidney cancer a year ago this week. I know what it's like. They say that a person doesn't become an adult until they've lost somebody that they love. But when they do, they never feel like more of a scared little kid. That's not right. Because the other side, and I'll say it, my enemy, are the corporations that would rather put $1 in their pocket or $1 billion in their pocket than protect the people that protect them. They'll go to a firehouse and have a birthday party for their kids, knowing that their product are getting the men and women in that firehouse sick. And that's not right. So what do you do with the problem? What do you do with the bully? How do you effectuate change? Well, your leadership hired the three of us. I'll call it a super group. I look down, it's not just the three of us here. There's teams, hundreds of lawyers that have made changes, effectuated changes. I look down at Joe Rice, who's been so instrumental in the asbestos litigation, in big tobacco, in every pharma litigation. I look at my partner and the best boss in the world, Jane Conroy, who was the national lead in stopping and addressing the opioid epidemic that has ravaged this country. She was on trial last year for 6.5 months against every major pharmaceutical distributor, seller, manufacturer, and she said with our team, that's not right. Big Pharma is brought to their knees by this supergroup. Big industry, big manufacturing, the corporations that put profit over people, we bring them to their knees because we need to. Not just for large swaths of people, but for individuals. You cannot put a price tag on what it is to lose hope, to lose pride, to lose all health. I myself have taken $190 million verdicts for individuals, $60 million, $40 million, because jurors in this country know the price of a human life. Happens all the time in courtrooms everywhere, and when it's time to speak truth to power, corporations listen to juries. And that's how we effectuate change. We hit these greedy corporations that literally came into a room like this and lied to all of you in the past. We hit them in their wallet. We hit them where it hurts. We change the system by putting fear into their budgets. How do we do that? We need all of you. We need you to go home to your friends and loved ones and coworkers And we need you to tell those who have been injured, those who are sick, to reach out to us. And Ann is going to explain a lot about how that happens. My father used to say, sometimes the lesson has to be taught until it is learned. We're going to teach these people what they've done, and we're going to hold them responsible. Jane Conroy was interviewed on the cover of the Wall Street Journal a couple months ago, and she said, trials and litigation shine a light that otherwise wouldn't be lit, and bring to the public information that they need to know. The journey starts today. We are turning on the lights, and we are going to expose them, and we will effectuate change for all of you and all of your loved ones and coworkers. And I thank you all for the privilege and honor.
You're going to send me that picture because this is awesome. I'm Ann Kearse. I'm in Charleston, South Carolina with the firm of Motley Rice. I've got many of my partners here, and you just heard about Joe Rice and a little bit about our firm. And President Kelly, I want to thank you for your leadership and bringing about what we hope to help with effect change with determination on that too. In your work, you instill trust amongst your members, and I know everyone out here as firefighters, you instill the trust of society on that too. You're our heroes. You work to save lives, and we're going to do everything we can with our litigation, our legislation, our collaboration, our education to get the word out and to seek justice. To seek justice, to seek truth, and to seek accountability. We've touched on the history of all these firms here. And President Kelly, when you were interviewing us, you probably didn't even know we've worked all together. Here we're talking and telling about what we've done before. But we've worked with Nick in 9/11. We've been to the town halls after 9/11. We worked with Sim and Hanley all through the tobacco cases, through the opioid things, and through asbestos. There's a lot of similarities in some of the litigations, and I think this is some of the things that were considered. The asbestos litigation, and we know your members have been ravished with asbestos exposure and mesothelioma. And the asbestos industry didn't want to make it public about the hazards of asbestos. The asbestos industry studied rats and found cancer. Sounds familiar now with the PFAS industry. Tobacco industry. Took a lot of work to uncover what we uncovered there. I don't know if people remember, 7 CEOs raised their right hand and said, smoking doesn't cause lung cancer. They finally came around. Sounds ridiculous now. PFAS industry is doing the same thing. Oh, it's this PFAS or that PFAS or this chemical or that chemical. But PFAS has known hazards. PFAS had hazards, as President Kelly mentioned, years and years and years ago. They had hazards in their files. They did studies, and they didn't want them to see the light of day. My firm over the last several years has been on the forefront of PFAS litigation. We have a team of lawyers, environmental lawyers, occupational lawyers, who have been working on PFAS and are working with the experts, many of the experts you've heard about today, and others that will be involved in any of the litigations that we pursue. We've been involved in understanding the science, and we know now what many of the companies knew, and it was talked about in the film. They knew and had information, and not only did they hide it, and President Kelly touched on this, they did a disinformation campaign. And what does that mean? It's not just misinformation. When you have disinformation, it's intentional. It's intentional to change the science, to try and change the science, to try and change the truth. And with our firms and our collaboration with our lawyers in the firms and with the scientists you have within your organization, President Kelly, we are going to continue to find those truths and continue develop the science and to continue to understand what's been happening. The human, social, and economic costs of the occupational disease among the firefighters is unacceptable. Again, as our protectors, our heroes, you save the lives. We want to hear your stories. Diane and Paul, you've been thanked so much. Elijah, I haven't had the opportunity to meet you, but what we do as trial lawyers is tell a story. We tell a story of individuals and how they've been injured, and not only to themselves and the suffering that they've gone through, but to their families and to society. And bringing those stories to light in itself is an art. So I applaud you and the Cotters for telling that story. It's so important to have a voice. Each of you have a voice, and we're looking forward over the next couple days, and more importantly, the relationship that we can build with the members here, 2,100 of you as leaders, and also to your communities at home. You've heard about the hazards of PFAS. You've heard about testicular cancers and the kidney cancers and the thyroid cancers. You've heard about the reproductive and the breast milk. So many of those studies were known about years and years and years ago. The liver functions and the high cholesterol that causes so many deaths on that too. We're still uncovering things, and we're still going to expose how much of the truth has been hidden on that too. What was not shared with the scientists, what was not shared with the regulatory bodies, and what juries will now know was hidden and took a toll on what has been known about PFAS and has allowed it to be utilized in the occupational settings, in the environmental settings, and more importantly, to wear in your bunker gear every single day. The disinformation campaigns we're going to expose. David Michaels is a former head of OSHA. He writes a book he calls Triumph of Doubt, and he writes specifically about PFAS. And he wrote about the uncovering of the evidence, and again, the disinformation campaigns in published literature. It's not just the lawyers saying it, it's the truth. Again, revealing the studies. And like we've said, it's compared to some of the other industries with that too. So over the next several days, we'll see many of you. There's a PFAS section on Wednesday. We'll be there. We promised President Kelly and the executive board that we are here for you. We've brought a team of our lawyers, our partners, our staff, our paralegals to be available for the next couple days. We have a booth in room 222. And if some people may remember, there's an old TV show called 222. We've got couches, we've got things to sit there. But what's important is today and the next couple of days, we want you to get to know us so that we can have a relationship going forward. Anything that is shared with us individually is confidential. And that's something important to know when as we work with President Kelly and as we advise the IAFF, the individual interests, if you're sickened or have health issues, or as we go forward on other things there too, it's confidential with us. You have a voice. Together, we're going to have a voice to affect change, as we talked about and what President Kelly has put to our mission. That's what we're getting to work for the next several years. It's not going to happen overnight. And people and members and your sisters and your brothers, we know they're going to keep developing disease. And we want to be there to help them fight, to tell their story. And to, as we talked about, and to uncover litigation. Sometimes people, why do you sue? So I say, I sue for safety. And what does that mean? So much of what is uncovered would never have seen the light of day, but for the fact we took a case, an individual, one voice, we went to a courthouse, we had rulings to say, no, you need to get those documents and provide them to your counsel. And then they're made public. And that's what litigation does. And that's when I say we sue for safety. But you have a voice, and if there's corporate interests at play that want to put profits before safety, we will expose that. As part of our work that we've been doing with the IAFF, we have a website. You'll see PFASlawfirms.com, and that's going to be in some of the materials you receive. And we'll have more information on that, on how to contact us, how to provide information so that we can have follow-ups with that too. We're ready to arm you with what you need and to find the answers. And we thank you, President Kelly, and your executive board, and the leaders here for entrusting us with a very serious and important job that all our law firms, we're going to work very, very, very hard. We're going to want you to trust us as you've built the trust for us as firefighters that we treasure deeply. We look forward to the next couple days and for the many, many months to come and really getting to know more about you, your members, and your communities. Thank you.